Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
One thing I've been curious about when it comes to fake news and infiltration from other countries and other countries pushing their agenda here stateside is, and I guess I'm looking to understand the movement a little better in general, is Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I both agree with that. You know, Black Lives Matter. Andrew agrees with that. I think we all in this room agree with that.
And you're saying lowercase b, lowercase
b,
l,
absolutely,
lowercase m.
yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Well, what gets even weirder than that, because I was hearing Mark Cuban explain to Megyn Kelly, that he's of course, for lowercase, letters. Everyone is,
right,
I think,
right.
Where they'd say they are. But he's even for capital letters, but he's not for blacklivesmatter.com. And now I was like, I don't even know. I thought that was all the same. Now, just because I'll let him say it on the air himself, but I did have someone who I would trust his opinion. It's not just a friend who reads a lot, but who does have concerns that Russia is behind Black Lives Matter. Do you know
I've never
much
heard
about that organization?
So I've never been on the Black Lives Matter website. I've heard some of the arguments against Black Lives Matter from conservative outlets. I've heard much of the support for Black Lives Matter as an organization. And I think, listen, we have to always weigh what we're affiliating ourselves with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing to affiliate yourself with Black Lives Matter as an organization and determine if you agree with the stance and the tenets of an organization. You do that with the Rotary Club. You do that with everything. So what's interesting about Black Lives Matter is that the name of the organization and the entity jumped the culture and became a much broader tagline and a much broader war cry, and a necessary one. Honestly, it's just a necessary one. And so it's tough, I think, for some folks, particularly white folks, to or maybe they're not always willing to separate out the BLM organization versus Black Lives Matter as a statement of truth,
Right.
And as a statement of recognition of years of oppression.
Right.
As a need of saying there is something that needs to be fixed. The only reason that lowercase b, lowercase l, lowercase m, Black Lives Matter needs to be said is because our history hasn't proven that to be the case. Our history hasn't proven that to be true. So despite the fact that the Constitution says that all Americans should be able to pursue happiness and have life and liberty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Black lives haven't gotten to live fully for good chunks of this American history. Black lives haven't gotten liberty for good chunks of this American history. And so that is worth talking about. That is worth talking to my children about. That is worth us as a society talking about. That's worth us as white people talking about and wrestling through that. And so that is, to me, that is one of the best things that has come from all of the conversations, all of the push. And so I'm willing to sort of separate wheat and chaff. It's a good, sort of separating wheat and chaff, straight from the Bible. And that's, I'm willing to separate wheat and chaff and go, it is good for us to talk about these things. I probably, if I were to look at the Black Lives Matter website and all the things that they stand for, based on some of the things I've heard, if those are true, I'm sure, struggle with some of those things.
Yep.
Or flat out just not support. But I can get behind Black lives mattering in our world, by the way. Let's not just limit it to the United States. That has not always been the case historically.
I think that's extremely well said. I've read books this year that I wouldn't have otherwise. I know a lot of people that read a lot of books this year that they wouldn't have otherwise. So there's a very good kind of wear-off effects of even, say, Black Lives Matter as a mission or a community or an organization. And the just to mention real quick, the person who told me that about potentially Russia behind BLM was not white, by the way. So that's probably sounds like that came from a white guy, but it did not. And then also, and this is where it got a little, where I'd love to have someone on here who's sort of an expert here to dig into it, because I have read through most of the BLM website.
Okay.
And honestly, there's a lot there that I agreed with, and then there's some I just don't know.
Sure.
And then there's a small percentage that I would disagree with, you know?
Yeah.
But then you hear, apparently it's hard to trust the news, you know, and then you try to figure out where you can connect with other people who actually know what they're talking about. And this one guy just mentioned that. So I just didn't know. I know there's a lot of people that are really very opposed to it as an organization. They would agree with it lowercase, but strongly opposed to it as an organization. And I just haven't quite, I guess, gotten the facts or data that I'm looking for to maybe understand where they're coming from. But
yeah, and I would say I haven't dug in either. I know we have enough work to do to make all the lowercase versions of it, meaningful and for true change to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I've just looked at, like, I know there's a big flurry of emotional activity over the capital BLM. And it's sort of like, I know that's there, and I've just chosen to not weigh into that.
Sure.
Perhaps it's a little bit of willful ignorance, but I think that seems to be something that has been hugely politicized.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's all this really good stuff that has kind of spun off of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the wheat that I think has spun off of this, and we've got a lot to work with there.
Yep.
And so I think I've just sort of said, let me lean into that and what I can learn there, and how that's going to impact, because that's very meaningful stuff.
Yeah, totally agree.